I'm thrilled to welcome a distinguished leader in healthcare technology, Suresh Soundararajan, the CIO of Virginia Department of Health. With extensive experience in public health initiatives and a deep commitment to leveraging technology for better health outcomes, Suresh has been instrumental in driving innovative solutions across Virginia's healthcare landscape. Suresh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a good introduction. Looking forward to this conversation.
Suresh, can you start by sharing your personal journey to becoming the CIO of Virginia Department of Health? What experiences or pivotal moments shaped your path into healthcare IT leadership?
Um, so it's been a journey, that's for sure, right? Some bumps and some bruises along the way, but I think the um, I've been the CIO for the agency for about 5.5 years now. Um, so took the job right around the pandemic, before the pandemic. So it was an interesting timing of sorts, but it's been very rewarding. That one was like as challenging as it was those straight 16 hours a day. So all that. So it has been pretty challenging, but also extremely rewarding in a lot of ways because that had also accelerated our transformation journey and path and access to resources that probably the traditional way would not have allowed us. But this has allowed for some accelerated transformation effort. Even though, as I said, the the work, the intensity was pretty high, the time of delivery and all of that. But it was also beautiful to see the journey, how things have transformed before and after, and kind of giving that perspective in a way. So yeah, so that's it's been 5.5, 6 years now into this job, and it's been, as I said, it's got its ups and downs, but mostly rewarding. I enjoy it. Um, but leading up to it is different roles within the agency itself. A different sort of leadership role, operation side of it. That way, I kind of understand the administration side of it as well, and so I had a good understanding and kind of building up to it, being the deputy for a little bit, and so all that led into this. Prior to that, I was with the private industry, a couple decades ago, and it's got, as I said, the plus and minus. Work for major companies, consulting with, for Oracle, for IBMs of the world, a little bit of travel involved. A lot of it, I think again it was a different journey coming into a public sector. Even in the past, one thing was, even with my private experience, I had clients who are public sector clients in a way, so I have a general understanding of the pays and the difference. Um, but health department coming in, and I think what kind of intrigued me was the lines of business we do, right? People don't realize, okay, you're coming into health department, okay, you do health, right? Health is a broader aspect. Then I come to learn of it, we have about 46 lines of businesses within the agency. It took me a few years before to realize that we have that many lines of um, businesses or lines of services to speak, right? And within that, you have multiple programs, and so it's pretty interesting in a lot of ways. And in a way, it's also a little bit of you know private's more financially rewarding, but the public side of it is more. There is a service mentality that goes with it, which like kind of um, improving the health outcome of folks and things, preventative health, and like every day I sit as part of the agency's leadership team, and things that come up always intrigue me. Oh, interesting, and how do we solve? And part of the approach is not keeping technology in the center of it, but just keeping the business aspect of it in the middle, and kind of leveraging, hey, where else could we actually leverage technology, data to have a better outcome? To how do we move the needle along the way? So it's been an interesting journey, and so far so good.
That's great. And in the 5.5 to 6 years that you've been at VDH as a CIO, can you share some examples of digital transformation initiatives that have had meaningful impact on healthcare delivery in Virginia?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of the when we the part of transformation is we had a few objectives, right? The objectives are like how do we improve citizen services, their experience, the engagement we have, right? The other big need we had was during COVID and other areas as well, like how do we improve our integration, interoperability capabilities, correct? So then while doing it, the biggest thing we find out is, okay, well, it's the technology side of it is one, but then you're also learning that you are uh, reshaping. You have to reshape your processes, right? You have to reshape your business models in a way. Um, and then, so these are kind of objectives we had. Okay, we do that now. As we all know, the velocity has changed over the years, right? Which means the traditional way of approaching will not work. Now we need some greater agility towards delivery, right? The biggest thing we did was a service management strategy, right? Came up with a management strategy a few years ago, um, and so basically looking at our services, how do we deliver those services, how effectively we are doing. So we deployed, we kind of had a plan and deployed ServiceNow, to as part of our, to understand our services requests better and kind of how do you shape it. So that's taken on pretty well. Like we are in the operation point at this point, after a couple of years, and now the biggest thing is now other service areas, like whether it's your HR or finance or procurement, have taken on that concept, right? So that is for me like just putting the ITSM itself is not great, but the transformation is how do you bring other service areas into it and they see the benefit of it. They're like, hey, why can't we use ServiceNow for this, right? That's a transformational thinking overall because when I was talking about the looking at your processes and all that, so that was a big one for us. Other than that, we have delivered many very like a lot of innovative solutions along the way during the pandemic and after. And so that's and then our office of vital records, we have a great director there, like basically our birth certificate, death certificates, marriage and divorce, all of that are issued out of the office. We have an excellent director who is forward thinking. We kind of leveraged that to say, hey, what are the operation opportunities, right, that we can leverage technology and make you even better, right? So we have done a lot of automation in that space, which has actually improved his Google rating. From when he took the job, it was 2.4. Today it's 4.5 within like last 4 or 5 years. And a lot of this to do with leveraging technology appropriately. Of course, he's like did a lot of business re-engineering as well. But those are critical areas. Another one is uh, data modernization. We are and then looking at our internal, for example, we used Oteemo for our agility, lean and agile. We want to be lean and agile, right? So we are like, okay, what are the things we need to do? So doing a lot of research, and we came up in our development effort. How quickly can we deliver a solution from development through production? Like, how do we minimize? How do we build? So we leverage the DevSecOps, right? We leverage Oteemo's help as well, and we are in a place now. Actually, the team has picked it up, and we could say, hey, look, we are doing DevOps, right? Are we 100%? Probably not, but I think I'm pretty confident to say we are 65 to 70% there, which is a big change. It's a big cultural shift as well for us. In the center of all of this is business, right? So that's kind of that. Um, let's keep it business centric, and let's make business transformation leveraging technology. That's kind of underlying theme.
Fantastic. Yeah, business transformation, leveraging technology. So in a transformation roadmap and in that journey, how do you balance short-term needs with long-term strategic goals?
That's the biggest challenge, right? I would always say that that's because when you there is always this um, people would have experienced this a lot. There is always this confusion about modernization and transformation, right? So modernization is not the same as transformation. So transformation is like, I've talked about this before to a few folks, like, in public talks, I've said this, uh, like, tell yourself I have modernized, tell yourself I have transformed, right? So you're like, silently in your head, if you keep saying that, obviously the feeling of transformation is, it's a higher lift, right? In the sense, like, you feel good. But then also there's a lot of challenges. We can talk about it, right? Like, there's a ton of challenges associated with it. So the difference is modernizing, it can only bring you up to current, and transformation can actually take you into the future, right? It's basically transformational places where we have not been there before, right? The places where you have not seen, right? Places where you have not visualized. That's what transformation is, right? It's basically taking you modernization is one part of the transformation, right? Transformation is like something that takes you to the next level where you have not been, where you have not even imagined in a way. So the thing is, your long-term goal has to be transformation. Always, I say that, right? Your modernization could be a short-term goal, achieving. So if you think about it, how do you make your short-term goals, uh, just not a throwaway instead of useful? That's one way to think about, right? Your short-term goal could be just modernizing, but then how do you lay the path for long-term goal? How do you transform? So I would tell people, like, at least for me to help, in my head, it's always transformational is long-term goal, right? You can't do it in a year. You can't do it in sometimes 2 years, because that involves a lot of other the processes, culture, right? There is so much going change management. There is so much going on around it. But short-term goals are modernizing could be one, because look, you have an old application that's failing, right? It's giving an error. It's a security vulnerability, right? These are real challenges. This you need to address. We can't look for a transformational effort, right? Those are short-term goals to say, right? How do I have to stop the bleeding? How do I survive? Let's keep it. So your short-term goals could be 3 months at a time, but your long-term goals should be 2 years. But then kind of adding up those 3 months at a time towards the 2 years.
Fantastic. That's a great way to look at it, Suresh. And I've not heard anyone put it that way. The difference between modernization and transformation, and kind of balancing out the short-term versus long-term strategy goals. The way you look through those lenses, and kind of overlay the short-term and long-term is pretty impressive, pretty insightful. With AI being kind of the center of attraction these days, right? What do you see as the biggest opportunities and risks associated with the adoption of AI in VDH and also in general in the public health industry?
So it's a thing, right? That we need to address. We cannot ignore that, because the fact that AI has been there for what? I think the first AI movie of sorts was made in 1926, right? It was a German movie, like human robots and stuff like that. The concept has always been there. And it's more and more. We know our Series of the world, we know our Alexas of the world. It's been with us, right? It's been with us. It's just part of us at this point, right? So we have to acknowledge and say, how do we leverage this? What is the meaningful use of it? Because there is a lot of potential uses, but there is a lot of potential for misuse as well, like, or misrepresentation, I should say, more than misuse. So I think that's where for that too in public sector agencies and public health and all of that, we just have to be mindful of that. There are places where it's definitely useful, but I would stay personally like part of the recommendation is from the agency we have been talking about more, but being deliberate and thoughtful about it. Governance, I think we should start with the governance beforehand just to make sure. So collect all your ideas for AI, right? Number one, like what we've done is first collect your thoughts. Part of the thing we are, I just gave a template to my team as well. Start putting it in buckets, right? Where it's a citizen experience engagement AI, or whether it's a data insight AI, right? And then it's operational efficiency AI, right? I could have three buckets in a way and then start putting towards it, right? And then kind of recognizing along the way what data sets you're using. That plays a major role, because if you're using data sets that's got out of PHIs and stuff like that, because for us being a HIPAA entity, a HIPAA hybrid entity, we just have to be mindful of that, right? We just cannot. And also, as part of your, like one of the thing I said is AI can do your basic task, but you need a quality, right? You need a quality check. I think that's where the future is going to go, right? There is going to be more workforce in the quality space of AI versus the AI itself. We know the tool can do whatever, like it's basically what you're given. So the quality, where what I mean by that is what you input into it, there needs to be a proper quality check of saying, like, you know what I'm saying, like we can't just throw garbage in, right? And same thing, we cannot take garbage out and just put it on display. So we need, I feel like from the workforce standpoint, I think the SMEs of the world will be in the front side and the back side. That's where a lot of jobs are going to shift in a way, right? Let AI do, but let the SMEs play a role in kind of the in and out of it. So from our agency standpoint, that's what we are looking at a lot of operational efficiency places where we could use AI. We are looking into invoices. We're looking into archived data, right? Going and asking natural language questions on those archived data, like the streamlining invoices. You know what I'm saying? So and like policies, right? That's one recent use case we've been talking about. Okay, and that basically we've been talking with our agency head as well. Part of my theories always has to be, because I'm a big business guy, I'm a technology guy. After people who have worked with me will know this, because I make it abundantly clear. Don't talk to me technology first, because I think that can happen behind the scenes, but an agency leader or a governor should be able to simply ask a question, right? What happened in 1990, right? You don't need 50,000 people working to get that report. That's pretty easy to scrub through and get it. But you need the quality check before and after to make sure the AI is looking at the right data sources. On the backside, making sure, like, it's not leaving to any biases, and that's the biggest fear, right? The biases in the public sector space. That's the biggest. Anything you put out, if it has bias, if it's ethical, those all really coming into play. So I think so. We have asked a few, like we are trying to come up with a template where we're asking those questions, like whoever is proposing an AI idea, we're saying, hey, what risks do you see upfront, right? What ethical issues do you see upfront? That way we can think through it, and then maybe the governance group can look into it and ask more questions before we actually put a technology behind it. We know technology's easy part here, right? It will solve it. There are like today, like if I go and say I need AI help in LinkedIn, I probably am going to get about 10,000 responses within a day or two, right? I'm just saying it's just that many people wanting to do it, but just a thoughtful process, thinking around it, all the aspects around it makes it more crucial to be thinking about.
Absolutely. So Suresh, I want to shift from digital transformation and talk a little bit about strategy and leadership. What is your approach to developing a strategy, a technology strategy for your organization? Do you use certain frameworks? Do you do it? How frequently do you do it? Like, how do you approach it?
So strategy is kind of in multiple ways, right? Like number one, agency has a strategy, right? Your organization has a strategy. Number one, like it should, if not, right? But typically organizations have a strategy, and then they have certain goals. You've mission certain work to work towards, right? Um, um, for us, it's very simple to protect and promote the health of all Virginians, right? It's very simple. And every 8.7 million people are important to the agency, right? Because every single person from, and maybe the future too, because there are child maternal outcomes and maternal child outcomes are all extremely important to VDH, right? So there are unborns out of the 8.7 million population plus people that are not born. Everything is important to us in a way. So it's a strategy is simple. So agency has a mission, and then every office, every program, everything has to align to that, right? That's basically what it is all about. It's called strategic alignment. You don't need to have a separate strategy per se, but you need to have a framework that aligns with that strategy, right? So, because one of our agency goal is to be a provider, be a trusted source of information, right, with respect to public health. Okay, just look at that. Be a trusted source means a lot of things. Number one, our content management. I'm saying that you're thinking about content. You're thinking about ways that you're delivering your service, right? What you deliver, people, cybersecurity, all that kind of goes into that simple statement, right? Be a trusted source. What is a trusted? So my thing is always that's the way I'm going. That's how I approach the entire strategic framework, right? You have certain things at the agency level. All of this agency level provides certain goals and framework. Now let's align a framework that fits into that model, okay? And then we broke it down into something very simple. Okay, we told our IT, our tech data folks to say, we're going to align with the agency, right? Number one, how do we align? The other part, like for me, strategically, what needs to happen from the workforce standpoint too, is how, our people, our folks, our workforce need to be able to connect to that agency goal, right? Because a lot of times what happens is we do something, but we don't know why we are doing it. Because we're doing it, of course, we get paid and whatever it is. But where do you stand? It's like a puzzle piece. I always tell you that, just a piece by itself doesn't make sense. But I give you a piece and show you the big puzzle in front of you in a way. Then you know where to put the puzzle in, and then you know how does it fit right into the big picture. So show that big picture and then point out to the fact that, hey, this is the piece of the puzzle that we are building. And then to say, how do you align with that bigger one? And that's how we kind of, it has been it was a couple talking to our workforce, getting their input, right, and what they think, where they fit. And they're like, oh, we don't feel like we understand this. And so we got a lot of feedback. And then that's how we said, okay, let's simplify this framework to see how we fit in. And for us, we just divided into three simple things, right? One is our service delivery, right? Customer the experience, because we are a service organization, which means that should be a top priority. We said we put three straight main buckets in, right? We added values of what do we need to do? Okay, accountability, responsibility, blah, 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 right? We have that. But how using those values, we just said, let's three buckets: digital transformation, because we know we need to do this because of a lot of where we need to be. We just said we need our workforce as the core pillar out of all of this, and we said service delivery. We just add three simple buckets, and we align all our activities within those three buckets, right? And then so those three buckets kind of related to the agency goals. So we just built a framework of strategy that aligns with the agency strategy.
That's amazing. Once you have the strategic alignment with the organization, with the agency as a whole, what's your approach to developing and fostering a culture of innovation and collaboration within your team?
Yeah, that's a good. I enjoy talking about this a lot because part of being a leader is that aspect, right? because you got to keep your workforce energized. Sometimes it's not the money, sometimes it's not, you know what I'm saying? All those are, because some things are temporary in a way, like it's a, uh, like I don't want to sound too spiritual here, but I think the bottom line is uh, happiness is kind of temporary. It's ebbs and flow. You just one time you go up and one time. Where do you find the middle ground where people can hang their hats on, right? What motivates them to keep going horizontally while you have your vertical ups and downs, like, you know what I'm saying? So how do you align them? So that's why those kind of strategic framework and telling them, hey, we are doing digital transformation, the alignment, we are doing a digital transformation. We are going to align all our activities to this and just showing them that path of saying and creating opportunities where we can. Okay, in this, like you may not sometimes DevSecOps is one area, right? We talked about uh, the team didn't know much about it when we started it. As in, like they've heard the terms and stuff like that, but the intricacies of that, right? Um, so sometimes you have to force it. Sometimes it's organic, right? It's that's the challenge I was talking about in a way, because when do you force it versus when do you because sometimes you feel like, hey, I have enough exposure around in a way, like because I've talked to leaders all the time. I talk to vendors. So I have good exposure. I'm like, hey, this will be great for the team, right? I have to wear a hat and like, hey, let me be a developer and think for a second, would this excite me, right? That's one question I always ask. And a lot of times, like, yeah, this might excite. So what I do is I throw in nuggets to folks to say, hey, what about this? They're like, oh, that may be a good idea. Sometimes they are too busy, right? So I will force a call with some vendor or somebody to just to learn, right? At the end of it, like even though if like it's probably a hour of conversation, like, but even if it's 5 minutes of content they can bring back and kind of wanting to work on it. So we have put a lot of stuff like that, right? Like, I've given people the space to go and operate, come and innovate. Like what I will do is I'll throw a business challenge. I will not give a solution forward, but I'll throw a business challenge and say, hey guys, team, can you think about something? Like how do we solve this kind of stuff, right? So different teams pick it up, different teams come up with it. There's a lot of ideas. Sometimes it's a low hanging fruit, like if SharePoint could solve an issue, right? Sometimes you need to build something. Sometimes you need to, but what it has done is basically it has given people an opportunity to kind of explore what's out there and also keeping in context with the business, right? We're not going to randomly innovate something which is of no use, but because you also don't feel the fulfillment in a way, right? If you're actually solving a true problem with innovation, that's when the fulfillment, right? Innovation alone doesn't, right? We see 1,000 things on the street which are innovative in a way, but it doesn't appeal to us. There are certain things that you and I want, and if the innovation is part of that, then you're like, you know what I'm saying? Like that makes sense, right? Um, so Tesla, right? It was so forward thinking, right? People are changing cars every 4 years. This guy's like, look, you don't have to change cars, you just change the software, right? You just that's basically what, like, that was a fantastic thinking. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like it saves money, plus at the same time it's an innovation, but it's relatable, correct? It's relatable. I think that's the whole idea, right? Take a true problem and try to solve it versus just innovation for the sake of it. I think so. That's basically So sometimes I help the team with the business case and just let them go and innovate based on business use case, and then let them go and innovate. So that kind of keeps folks motivated in general.
So in when things are not going well, in moments of high pressure, how do you personally maintain clarity of vision and inspire that same focus within your team?
Yeah. So it's a good question actually. So I'll people will hate me because I always talk about baseball, right? I was a coach. My kids played baseball. My older son played, and all of that, like through college. And so part of the baseball analogy is basically how do you define success? How do you define things not going well for you, right? So it's in your eye or is it somebody else's eye or what? The reason I bring baseball is if you hit like a batter at 300, right? That is success rate of 1 in less than, right? Three in 10 attempts. It's considered a really great success at a major league level, right? So the point with the way I'm going is, but on a math score, if somebody tells like, I failed, I'm hitting only 300, you know what I'm saying? Or in a basketball, like my shooting percentage is 30%, it's not good, correct? So the reason I'm pointing that out is it's how that kind of perspective you need to bring it to the team and to myself, right? Did I set my expectations too high? Because you can adjust, right? You can adjust those, right? So failure, really, you have to think about, have I still made progress, right? I'm just saying, like, did my team still win the World Series or went to the playoffs? You know what I'm saying, or whatever that may be. So that's what you need to think about, right? What, like, the failure piece of it, a project failed. Is it the failure reasons for the project? There are plenty. There is always that pressure of not wanting to fail, not doing right. But so I'm always skeptical about taking on larger, longer projects, right? I always take, everybody would talk to me, the vendors, everybody knows that, like, well, don't give me like a 5-year plan, right? Because so that's what I meant. Like, you have to define your success rate to a shorter period, shorter window. And, like, you know what I'm saying? So if I go on the 3 months interval, I can actually keep my workforce engaged, right? It's easier to keep an employee focused for 3 months versus 1 year, right? Think about that. It's easier to measure your progress in 3 months versus 1 year, right? It's more instant feedback on that. So before we call something failure, let's do a pilot of this concept. Let's do an idea of, like, that's why you don't go into a project before you do a pilot, right? You just have to take lighthouse projects, like I like to refer them as lighthouse projects, right? High visibility, quick fix, quick hits, right? And then, like, building the trust around it. All of this matters, right, for a success or failure, right? Even if like, I'm just saying, if I build enough trust by proving myself in shorter windows, my boss or somebody else might say, yeah, I understand. Like, let's take 2 more months to finish this, deliver this, right? Versus me straight away taking on a 2-year project and I'm behind constantly and they don't see a progress, right? Because if you take a 2-year project, you cannot report a project. We know how IT projects or anything else goes, right? You can't just report progress the first month, 2 months, 3 months, when it's a logical sense. So my recommendation would always be break it into smaller logical units, claim success, make it your journey stop, right? And reassess. Maybe you have to take the train on the opposite side and go back home versus going all the way, or continue your journey, right? Appreciate the journey and keep continuing. So keep your losses to minimum in a way, right? That's basically what it is. And even within that, see if you can find success. People might have in that 3 months, even though we did not deliver the outcome, but we might have gone somewhere with your staff getting highly motivated. They're willing to work. You know what I'm saying? There are many other factors that come into play.
I'd love to move into some of the lessons learned in your journey as an IT leader. If you could rewrite the playbook on one of your past major projects, what would you do differently and why?
Quite a few of them, right? Over the 30 years. So the biggest reason, this kind of aligns with the previous question too. Without a business buy-in, business alignment, I would never take on a project. right? I'm just saying the ownership is such a people don't understand. Ownership and accountability is such a big deal um, to the success of any project, anything, right? Anything we do. So there have been experiences in the past when we hastily went on a couple projects or direction, took a path when there's not enough commitment, right? So that's a big, um, like, it's the journey that we're traveling together, right? Let's try to travel together, right? Versus, I took the train and then somebody, they wanted to come in, they didn't like, so it's kind of buying that. So I always emphasize that. So even now, that's one strong thing I emphasize. I won't even sign an agreement when it comes to me. I'm like, has the business looked at it, right? Did you get their feedback first before? Like, it's a constant lessons learned over the years to say, because that was some kind of organizational commitment has to be there before you take on anything.
And along those lines, do you think the business is always right, or have you pushed back?
Yeah. So it's like it's more than so like I think sometimes it's not binary, right? So I think that's the piece I've learned over the years too. If you talk about lessons learned too, right? That's one of the things. It's not always binary. There is no yes or no. Sometimes there's no right or wrong, right? It's always the point in time, right? So at that point, either the way I look at it is either I didn't provide them sufficient information to make that decision, appropriate decision, or they didn't give me enough information. They were not aware of certain information or whatever, right? So I'm always like, there'll be a point when you have to make a decision in a meeting, which we will make, right? Like a lot of times it has to do with if it's compliance, right? If it's security, those kind of stuff, it's pretty hard, fast rule. There is nothing bending. Everything else, so factors you need to keep in mind is like, hey, the timeline you're looking at, right? What are you asking for? If it's out of compliance, out of security, there's no negotiational point there because, yeah, those are points where we disagree with each other to say like, because somebody wants something. But what I have also learned is they are all smart people too, right? A lot of these people are smart people. Where if you explain that, they're like, okay, that makes sense, right? That why is so important, right? Whatever you like, instead of like saying, I said so, forget that. Because let's explain why, let's go back to the basics. And sometimes they make a lot of sense too. Like I might come up with an angle. That's why if you don't go with the binary approach, there is a lot of room for negotiation. There is a lot of room for learning. Don't, as I tell people, don't go there to teach or preach. Go there to learn. Doing a meeting. Always, right? So go there to learn versus teach or preach, right? You can always teach by learning. So that's the biggest philosophy I adopt in my life to say you can still teach by learning. So, yeah.
Go there to teach or preach. Go there to learn.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And along those lines, being a little more specific around resilience and adaptability, the qualities that are needed for a CIO. What challenge or failure has given you the most perspective on being resilient and being adaptable as a CIO?
So the resiliency comes from being okay. Recently, I was talking to my team about leadership and all that, right? It's okay to be uncomfortable, right? Being comfortable, it might sound stupid, but it's being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? That means you're comfortable being uncomfortable in a way, right? So it's okay. So part of it is putting yourself in a situation that you may or may not fully know, right? Part of sometimes is just rising up and saying, hey, let me try this, right? Nobody's going to slap your hands for trying, right? Like, because people appreciate that in general. So I've put myself in that kind of situations where just to go learn, right? Like just to see, like how do you become resilient? Is because if you're always in the comfortable zone, you'll never become resilient, right? So it's like training for your weights. So you got to keep pushing yourself up, preparing yourself for something, right? So it's part of preparation. So you got to prepare yourselves up to a point where you can be. Resiliency comes with preparation, right? It's not or resilient. That's what resiliency means, right? Like you just if it's iron, like you have to soak it in for the longest time, right? Before it really becomes right. If you're cooking rice, you got to soak it in, right? Everything like this is preparation. For anything, it takes preparation. So truly, I'm a strong believer in that because if you don't mentally prepare yourself day in and day out, you have to have a sense of being. If you're a leader, you'll see how it's a sense of being versus it's not a one single moment. Like to add, like if the question was to say, was there one single thing that changed it? No, it's not, because I've prepared for this because I was a CIO even before I was a CIO in my head. Does it make sense to you? Because in a way, because that's how you prepare yourselves, right? If I didn't become president because I'm a president today of something. President would have thought about being a president for 15 years of their life, or even from their childhood, right? They Major League Baseball players, they just didn't show up to hit the ball, right? They were preparing themselves for that moment, right? So you have to be a CIO even before you're a CIO. You have to be a CIO much before in your life. You have to prepare for the leadership. Maybe you don't have the term CIO, you don't have the title CIO, you may have some other title, I don't care for that. But you're preparing yourself for something bigger. You're preparing yourself for something that's outside of yourself, right? So that's outside of what you know in a way. So that's what I mean by being uncomfortable, being prepared, and that builds resiliency automatically, right? Because like I don't know, the late great Kobe Bryant, I'm a big fan of his basketball wise, because they asked sometimes like, are you not afraid of failing? And he said like, I know. Because why? Because look, I've did 1,000 shots before coming to the game, right? Yesterday I was 2,000 same shots. For me in my head, that's the 1,001, right? That's the 1,001st shot. It has nothing to do with the game situation, nothing to do with it. I am looking at it as another shot, right? Versus 10 seconds in the clock, 4 seconds in the clock. No, I got to my sweet spot, I'm taking the shot. Whether it goes or not, at least I'm not worried about the failure. So that's the big piece. I feel like to your question about resiliency, CI or whatever you want to become, you got to prepare for it mentally. You got to put yourself in situations that prepares you to get mentally there. So.
That's a great, that's a great way to look at it. And you touched upon a core theme of my last question, which I was going to ask you. One of the core themes of our podcast is to serve as a platform for aspiring IT professionals to hear from leaders such as you and your stories, your experiences, and kind of what made you a CIO and a successful leader. What you touched upon there is definitely a mindset that every aspiring IT leader or just any professional in any industry should have, right? Are there any other specific skills or experiences that you believe are essential, for those that are aspiring to be a CIO one day, to navigate the path of executive IT leadership?
Yeah. So you have to be I think first you have to be a strategic leader, right? Strategic thinking. You have to think broader. Like technology is something you have to keep up with, right? You're not going to be a developer anymore. You have to learn to detach yourself from, like, that's the thing, getting into the weeds. How do you, so that's a tough art. It's more than art than a science to it, right? How do you not, because you're used to doing certain things, and how do you separate yourself? How do you detach yourself and kind of look at it from a bigger standpoint, strategic standpoint? I think that's part of the critical thing, because, and the biggest skill is how do you not talk technology and still get it done, correct? So that's the piece, because you are that in-between person who is a strategic thinker. You have to be as part of the executive leadership of the team or whatsoever. So it's a different shift, complete different shift from your technical background. I think that's a skill I would definitely, it's an acquired skill in a way, but some it does come, there's some natural ability, but it's an acquired skill of you have to constantly think, okay, how do you not respond in a sequel? How do you not respond in a, what I'm saying? How do you not write a long paragraph instead of like make it into a short paragraph? And how do you summarize this long, you did 3 months of outstanding work. How do you summarize that in 2 lines? This is a skill set, I think, growing in the future of CIOs also. That's what it's more a strategic position, right? And with the technology background in a way. So that's what that is.
It's a great way to put it, Suresh. And what you said about summarizing reminded me of a quote that I read somewhere. It says, I did not have time, so instead of writing a short email, I wrote a long email.
Exactly.
It's a big skill and time to summarize your thoughts and be very concise.
Right, exactly. And you can always write a long one, but then keep it to yourself. Then you read it again and then figuring out. That's why I said you have to develop this, right? It's not an overnight thing. Your 7 sentences got to get to 6, to 5, to 4, and then maybe to 2, and then to 1. So that's the way to do it.
Amazing. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Oteemo CIO Podcast. Suresh, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey and insights. Thank you to all our listeners. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you found value in this conversation with Suresh, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone you think might benefit. We've got more insightful episodes lined up, so stay tuned. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries and leading the way. Cheers.
Thank you.